I've traveled alone many times for both work and leisure, and I've never really thought much about the places I stayed in. As long as the room was clean, the bed was decent, and the door locked, I never cared too much. But there's one trip I'll never forget. One night in a hotel that made me swear I'd never stay in a small-town roadside place again. It happened about 3 years ago. I had a long drive ahead of me, crossing several states to attend a family gathering. I wasn't in a rush, so I planned to stop halfway and crash in whatever motel or hotel I could find. Around 10:30 p.m., exhausted and blurry-eyed, I spotted a small hotel right off the highway. The neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters burned out. Still, it was the only place I'd seen for miles, and I was too tired to keep driving. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The place looked old, like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. A faded green carpet lined the lobby, and the front desk was manned by an older man with slicked-back gray hair. He smiled when I walked in, though something about it felt rehearsed, like he'd been practicing it in the mirror. "You need a room for the night?" he asked. "Yeah, just for one night," I said. He slid the registration book toward me. Old-fashioned, no computers, just a paper log where I scribbled my name. He handed me a key, an actual brass key on a heavy plastic tag with the number 6 stamped on it. "Room's down the hall, second on the left," he said, voice low and calm. "Breakfast at 7. I thanked him and walked down the hall. The carpet was even more threadbare here, the lighting dim and flickering. My room door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The room itself was basic. Queen-sized bed, faded curtains, a small TV sitting on top of a dresser. The air smelled faintly of mildew mixed with cheap cleaning solution. But I was too tired to care. I threw my bag on the chair, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. For a while I just scrolled through my phone, letting myself unwind. Around midnight, I turned off the light and settled in. That's when things got strange. At first, it was just small noises, like creaks in the hallway. Old buildings make sounds, I told myself. But then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. They passed by my door, stopped, then continued. I froze. My heart started pounding. Maybe another guest? But the hotel parking lot was practically empty when I pulled in. I got up, tiptoed to the peephole, and looked out. The hallway was empty. Shaking it off, I went back to bed. I had just started to drift when I heard it again. Footsteps. Only this time they stopped directly in front of my door. I sat up, listening. Silence followed. Then, a soft knock. Not loud, not aggressive. Just 2 light taps. My throat went dry. Who the hell knocks like that at 1 in the morning? I stayed quiet, not moving, not answering. After a minute, the footsteps started again, slow and dragging, moving away. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone confused the rooms, maybe a drunk guest. But I couldn't shake the unease. Around 1:30, I woke again, this time to the sound of my doorknob rattling. Someone was trying to turn it. I jumped up, adrenaline surging. The deadbolt was locked, thank God. Whoever it was jiggled the handle for a few seconds, then stopped. I held my breath, ears straining. I heard the faintest whisper outside my door. I couldn't make out words, but it sent chills straight through me. I backed away, grabbing the chair and wedging it under the doorknob, hands shaking. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the curtains. I finally worked up the courage to leave the room. When I got to the lobby, the man at the desk was still there. "How was your night?" he asked, smiling that same strange smile. I hesitated, then said, "Fine." But before I left, I glanced back at the registry book he'd had me sign the night before. My name was the only one written down, no other guests. I grabbed my bag and left as fast as I could. To this day, I don't know who was outside my door that night, or if the desk clerk knew more than he let on. All I know is, I'll never stay in a hotel like that again. I've never liked driving at night. There's something about the way the headlights cut a narrow tunnel into the dark that makes me feel more exposed than protected. Still, when my boss asked me to stay late for an urgent project, I didn't think twice. By the time I finished and got on the road, it was almost midnight. The trip from the office to my apartment should have been 40 minutes, but that night it felt endless. The highway was nearly empty. A few trucks lumbered past now and then, their trailers humming like tired giants. I kept the radio on low, more for company than for music. The hum of my old Honda was steady, comforting. About 20 minutes in, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Nothing unusual, except the car stayed there, perfectly matched with my speed. I slowed a little. They slowed too. I sped up. They did the same. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the driver was zoning out, just happening to mirror me. But after 5 miles of this, I couldn't ignore it. They were following me. I changed lanes. So did they. My stomach tightened. I tried to keep calm, scanning for an exit, a gas station, anything. The stretch of road I was on was one of those long, rural highways with barely any signs of life. Just trees, fields, and the occasional flickering streetlight. I tapped my brakes, hoping they'd pass. They tapped theirs, too. That's when the fear really started to set in. I remembered stories, people being forced off roads, robbed, worse. I told myself to stay logical. Stick to lit areas, I muttered. Don't stop. Don't pull over. A green sign appeared ahead. Rest area, 2 miles. I decided to take it. Even if it was empty, at least there might be cameras, maybe a trucker or two. I flicked on my blinker. The car behind me hesitated, then flicked on their blinker too. My heart pounded. The rest area came into view. A lonely parking lot with one dim light and a single vending machine glowing under a shelter. No cars, no trucks, just emptiness. I panicked and swerved back onto the highway at the last second. The car behind me did the same, jerking hard to stay on my tail. Whoever they weren't just coincidentally following anymore. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind was racing. Should I call the police? What would I even say? Someone's following me. Would they take it seriously? I tried to memorize the license plate, but the glare of their headlights made it impossible. Then, they inched closer. Too close. Their high beams flashed, flooding my mirrors with white light. Shit, I hissed, swerving slightly. They pulled back, then surged forward again like they were playing some sick game. The highway stretched empty ahead. No exits, no stations, just miles of dark road. I was trapped. That's when I saw a car up ahead, parked on the shoulder with hazard lights blinking. Relief rushed through me. Another person, maybe help. As I got closer, I realized the driver was standing outside. A tall man, leaning against the hood, smoking. I slowed instinctively, thinking maybe I could stop, ask for help. But as my headlights washed over him, he turned his head. His face lit up in the glare. He smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile you give to reassure someone. It was wide. Too wide. And he didn't move out of the way. He just stood there, like he was waiting for me. I slammed the gas. The car behind me did the same. The man on the shoulder flicked his cigarette into the dark and stepped toward the edge of the road, almost like he was about to join the chase. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I flew past him, refusing to look back. The other car stayed glued to me. Another 10 minutes. That's how long the chase lasted, though it felt like an hour. My phone sat in the cup holder, but my hands were shaking too much to dial. All I could do was drive, pray for an exit, hope for another vehicle. Finally, headlights appeared ahead. 2 cars traveling together in the opposite direction. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't completely alone. The car behind me hesitated. Their beams dipped. They slowed, just slightly. Then, without warning, they swerved into the next U-turn lane and disappeared into the dark, back the way we'd come. I kept driving, tears stinging my eyes, my body trembling. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station 15 miles later, where I sat in my car with the engine off, trying to breathe. I reported it to the police. They asked for a plate number I didn't have, a description I couldn't give clearly. Probably just someone messing around. the officer said. Maybe, but I know what I felt. That wasn't a prank. It wasn't random. Someone wanted me afraid. And they succeeded. Even now, when I drive at night, I catch myself checking the mirrors every few seconds, waiting to see headlights appear and match my speed. Waiting for that game to start all over again. I still catch myself replaying the first night we moved in, like I'm trying to find a single small choice that would have made everything different. It was the kind of house you see in listings and think, one day, and then one day actually comes. Me and my girlfriend, a rescued cat named Bella, boxes stacked like small towers, and the silly, exhausted joy of finally having a place that felt like ours. For the first week, it was exactly that. Warm, messy, alive. There was one weirdness about the block. The house to our right looked like someone had started a renovation and then just abandoned it mid-project. The front was boarded, paint half peeled, and the back garden, where the fence had been ripped out to be replaced, was left open. That meant our backyard and their backyard met in a gap of dirt and loose boards. Behind that empty shell was another property, a shared house, where a group of young men came and went. They'd sometimes cut through the abandoned lot to get to the street. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Maybe they had permission, maybe it was just convenience. Our first night in the house, we sat out back, exhausted but happy, and watched the stars until a window across the way caught my eye. There was a figure framed in the dark, just standing there looking straight at us. It wasn't a quick glance. He didn't duck or glance away. He just stared. No expression. The room behind him looked unlit, which made his face look like a cutout against nothing. I felt my skin goosebumps the way you get when a draft finds you. We laughed it off and went in. You tell yourself small things when you're not ready to admit you're scared. Neighborhoods have characters. People are curious. The next few days passed normally. We unpacked, put up pictures, and Bella investigated every room like she was reclaiming land. Then one evening, when the light had dropped low and we were sharing a bottle of wine under a thin cloak of stars, we heard wood scrape. The makeshift board fence that divided the empty lot from the house behind it slid aside, and 3 men stepped into view. They didn't call up or knock. They simply stood there watching us. "You all right?" I said before I could stop myself, because when strangers are bold enough to walk into your yard, politeness is a weapon. The youngest, late 20s, I guessed, held a plastic bag that rustled in a way that didn't sound like clothes. He offered us washing tablets he'd obviously taken from somewhere. We declined. I cracked a joke because the scene felt so absurd that laughter was all the armor I had in that moment. They smiled and left, but the smile sat wrong in my stomach. After that, they began to show up more often, not friendly smiles, the kind of presence that says someone is keeping count. They walked through the broken gap as if it were an open invitation, not trespassers. Sometimes they would simply stand in the abandoned garden and stare at the back of our house the way you stare at a painting in a gallery, not because you appreciate it, but because you're memorizing it. We're 20. That age brings a mix of invincibility and insecurity. I remember thinking, maybe they're testing the waters, maybe they're bored kids, but the way they watched me and my girlfriend felt targeted. My girlfriend, who'd unwrapped her engagement ring the same week we moved in, started moving like she was never alone. She'd check the locks twice at night, sit by the living room window with a book but no intent to read, and start leaving lights on in rooms she wasn't in. The house that had felt like a sanctuary was shrinking into a trap. One afternoon, I was cleaning the front room when 2 police officers walked around the side and into the abandoned lot. They lifted the loose boards, looked around for a couple of minutes, and then left without saying a word. Their brief visit was supposed to be reassurance. Instead, it felt like confirmation that something had happened there, but we would never be told what. A few days later, they knocked on our door. "The house behind you is vacant now," they said, like it was small talk. The men were kicked out for antisocial behavior. Relief was a physical thing, like a weight lifting. If they were gone, then the escalation that had been nibbling at our nerves had to stop, right? It didn't. One morning I was in the bathroom when a bang shook the house. I ran to the spare bedroom where my girlfriend was filming something out the window. She silenced me with a look and replayed the clip. A man we'd never seen before stood in the abandoned lot and pointed at our upstairs window. When she noticed him, he bolted, sprinting past the side of our house, checking the door handle on his way by. He vaulted back into the lot as if he had no right to be there but planned to leave a footprint of his presence. He started pounding on the windows of the empty house until the glass rattled like someone was knocking on our skulls. We called the police. They watched the footage, took our statement, and left. They didn't stay. They didn't canvass the street. We were left holding each other on the sofa, trying to taste logic through the metallic tang of fear. A few nights later, a whistle cut through the dark at 2:16 a.m. A long, low whistle, the kind you hear in stories about harassment. We held our breath and then heard the tapping on the bedroom window. The cameras should have recorded it, but for reasons that felt too targeted to be coincidence, nothing was on the footage. Whoever had been there had been careful. Whoever had removed that footage had wanted us to know they had been. We spent the next night at my mother's. Returning in the morning felt like stepping back into a scene from a movie where the evil returns to inspect its work. Our Ring doorbell lay on the porch in a sad little pile. The SD card was gone. Somebody had been in our yard while we were away. Somebody had taken a piece of our safety. When we told the officer on the phone, she was blunt. "That's a sign," she said. "They may be planning something." Her honesty was a cold comfort. At least someone said the words we were thinking. The harassment didn't stop. It escalated in small, focused ways. Knocking on the side fence at night. Footsteps that paused outside the front door and then went away. Shouts across the street at odd hours. Just enough noise to unsettle sleep. Never enough to force a confrontation. We filed reports, each one a repetition of the last. The phrase, "We'll send someone by," began to feel like a looped recording. 3 weeks in, I was watching clips from the indoor camera with my girlfriend when a notification blipped across my phone. I woke her up. The live feed showed 2 masked men moving along the side of our house, flashlights sweeping windows, the silhouette of one holding what looked like a crowbar. Like a theatrical prop that belonged in a horror film, until you realize it's real, and the film is your life. A man I recognized from a dozen small, terrifying moments, the blank stares, the pointings, stood in the road opposite our house in a black mask and hood. He spread his arms wide in a slow, deliberate way, as if he were some crude mimicry of crucifixion. He tilted his head and stared up at our bedroom window, and the way he held himself felt like a message. I can be anywhere. I can watch. We called the police. Again. They told us it wasn't illegal to stare. They told us there was little they could do without being able to prove an imminent threat. We were young, they suggested, and perhaps overreacting. But fear is not something that listens to reason. It is a drum that keeps time for every small noise at night. And we learned to measure our nights in the distance between our house and the streetlight. We installed more cameras, bought motion lights, replaced the flimsy back gate with a welded fence, and changed our routines. We moved a camera back outside only to have it smashed that very night. We began to sleep in shifts sometimes, one of us awake to watch the other sleep because being alone felt like bait. Friends stopped coming over if they could avoid it. The simple pleasure of sitting in our shared kitchen at midnight with music on turned into a calculated risk. The last video we caught is still the worst. It's grainy, late, and short. Just 30 seconds of static and then the outline of a man in a hood walking across the lawn under a flashlight beam. He stops under our bedroom window, tilts his head, and leans forward. The audio is quiet, but you can hear him whispering the way you whisper when you don't want to wake the dead. He says something me and my girlfriend have both heard in fragments before. Words that were used like keys to unlock private memories. We can't make out all of it, but we both swear the cadence was the same as the voice we once knew. The police. They come and they go. They file another report. They say they're increasing patrols, though the increased presence feels performative and temporary. They remind us to keep our doors locked. They remind us that stubborn staring and intimidation are hard to prosecute unless it crosses a specific legal line. They remind us over and over that the law is a blunt instrument when someone decides they want to carve fear into the seams of your life. I'm telling you this because the worst part isn't the damage. It isn't even the danger, though danger is always the thinnest skin between you and a life that ends on a curb. The worst part is how it changes the inside of you. Every safe corner becomes a potential threat. Every knock at the door produces the same jolt of adrenaline as a near-miss crash. We've learned to flinch at the sound of wind in a certain way, because it could be attempts at a real window rattle. We sleep with our phones across the room, armed with emergency numbers and a simple plan that feels tragically inadequate. Lock the doors, call the police, run if you have to. Tonight, twice this week, I set my camera on record before going upstairs. It feels petty, like photographing the clouds, until you watch the clips and see someone slow their step when faces appear in windows, someone who knows the exact cadence of bellies that feed cats and the way me and my girlfriend hold hands in the dark. We get videos and we get the same thin, exhausted sympathy from authorities. We get warnings that sound like disclaimers. We still love this house. We still put up a little tree in the corner during holidays and laugh at Bella when she chases a stray sunbeam. But there is an ache behind that love now, a sense that our life is on loan, and that some part of our neighborhood has been claimed by people who like to leave their signatures in the form of a knocked-out door or a removed camera. If you take anything from this, let it be two things. First, take watching seriously. When something small unnerves you, do not wait for it to turn into something worse. Act. Second, never let anyone tell you you're overreacting when your instinct screams. Fear is not a crime, it's a signal. We still wake at odd hours, we still check the feed. And sometimes late, when the neighborhood is a quiet and perfect set of painted houses and sleeping cars, I'll stand by the bedroom window and whisper to the dark, "We're here. We're not going anywhere." It's more like a prayer than it is a promise. The last clip we have ends with the masked man turning his head as if he has heard me. He smiled, something small and close-lipped, and then walked away. We are waiting for the day that ordinary things return. A mail carrier that rings the bell. A neighbor who waves without measuring you like a threat. The soft quiet of sleep that isn't threaded with listening. Until then, we tape our windows shut with careful hands and keep the camera rolling. If anything else happens, we'll post it. We'll file it. We'll keep talking about it because silence is how they win, and we're not ready to give them that. I should have known something was wrong the moment we pulled up to that cabin. It was Friday evening, late fall, and the mountains stretched out around us, dark and endless. My girlfriend, Emily, had found the place online, a rustic little getaway, the kind of cabin that promised peace, fresh air, and a break from our phones. She'd been excited about it all week. "No Wi-Fi, no distractions," she'd said with a grin. "Just us and nature." And at first I agreed. The listing had shown a cozy wood cabin with a porch, a fireplace, and trails nearby. It sounded perfect. But when we finally arrived, the place looked different. The trees pressed right up against the cabin, their branches clawing at the roof. The porch sagged under our weight, and the windows were so clouded you couldn't see through them. And then there was the silence. No birds, no rustling animals, not even the distant hum of power lines. Just nothing. The owner had left the key under a rock near the steps. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of mold and wood smoke, as if someone had burned green logs years ago and never aired it out. The furniture was basic: a couch, a wooden table, 2 chairs. The only light came from a few oil lamps, since there was no electricity. "No signal either," Emily said, holding up her phone. She wasn't surprised. She actually seemed pleased. "Told you, it's a detox weekend." I forced a smile. "Yeah, great." We unpacked, lit the fireplace, and made a simple dinner. By the time night fell, the forest outside had turned pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows everything. Even with the fire burning, I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were leaning closer to the windows, as if listening. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it clearly. The sound of a door opening. It wasn't loud, more like a slow creak of wood, but it came from inside the cabin. I sat up, heart hammering, and glanced at Emily, still asleep, her breathing steady. The front door was locked. I'd checked it twice before bed. Grabbing the oil lamp, I crept into the main room. The shadows flickered across the walls, stretching into strange shapes. That's when I saw it. The front door stood slightly open, swaying on its hinges. I froze. I was sure I had locked it. I remembered turning the key, sliding the bolt. My skin crawled. I stepped toward it cautiously, every creak of the floor echoing too loud. Just as I reached for the handle, a low growl rumbled behind me. I spun around. It was Max, the owner's old German shepherd. The guy had told us the dog wandered the property and liked to keep visitors company. Max was standing at the edge of the open door, hackles raised, teeth bared, growling into the forest beyond the porch. "Easy, boy," I whispered. But Max didn't even glance at me. His eyes were locked on the tree line, unblinking. The woods were silent. Too silent. I shut the door quickly, bolting it, and Max whined low in his throat, pacing back and forth. I stood there in the dim light, straining to hear something, anything. But there was nothing, just the thick, oppressive silence. Eventually, Max settled near the door, lying down, but still alert, ears twitching at every sound I couldn't hear. I barely slept after that. Emily didn't believe me when I told her. "You probably forgot to lock it," she said over breakfast, brushing crumbs off the table. "I didn't," I insisted. I remembered turning the key, and Max, he knew something was out there. She rolled her eyes. "Dogs bark at squirrels." But when we stepped outside that morning, I finally had proof. On the porch, just in front of the door, were footprints. Bare feet. Human. Large, flat impressions pressed into the thin layer of dirt and pine needles that covered the boards. The toes were splayed, the arches deep. I knelt down, tracing one with my fingers. "Emily, look at this. Someone was here." She leaned closer, frowning. "Weird. But maybe it's from the owner?" I shook my head. "They're fresh. These weren't here last night." Then something else hit me. The prints weren't just dirty, they were muddy. Dark, wet soil smeared across the porch. But the ground around the cabin was dry. Dusty, not muddy at all. Emily noticed it too. Where the hell would mud even come from? The trails are all pine needles and rocks. Exactly. Unless... I remembered something the owner had mentioned casually when I booked the place. Something about a marshy valley 2 miles down the ridge. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now my stomach tightened. Whoever had left those footprints had walked barefoot at night, all the way from that valley, through the woods, in the cold, and they had come straight to our cabin. That day, Emily tried to brush it off. We went hiking, made lunch, pretended everything was normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about those prints. Every snapped twig in the woods made me jump. By nightfall, my nerves were raw. I checked the locks 3 times, barricaded the windows with chairs, even kept the fireplace poker by the bed. Emily teased me for being paranoid, but when Max planted himself by the door again, growling low, she stopped laughing. Around 2 a.m., the sound came back. Not the door this time. Knocking. 3 slow knocks on the wooden wall, right beneath the bedroom window. I froze. Emily sat bolt upright, eyes wide in the dim firelight. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, clutching my arm. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I crept toward the window, holding my breath. The glass was fogged, but beyond it, the woods loomed black and endless. I couldn't see anything. Max barked suddenly, sharp and furious, launching at the door. The knocking stopped. For the rest of the night, we didn't sleep. By dawn, I was ready to leave. I didn't care about the money we'd spent, didn't care if Emily was disappointed. Something was out there, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what. But when I opened the door, my stomach dropped. The porch was covered. Absolutely covered in muddy footprints. Not just one set this time. Dozens. Bare feet, different sizes, overlapping, circling the cabin like a swarm. They led from the forest around the porch back into the trees. Emily gasped. "Oh my God." I crouched, touching the mud. It was cold, slick, and it wasn't from here. The soil was darker, heavier, like swamp mud, from that valley. Someone, or something, had walked miles through the night to surround our cabin, watching, waiting. We packed in 10 minutes flat. By the time the sun broke over the trees, we were already driving down the mountain, Max barking in the back seat like he knew we were running from something real. I never looked back. I didn't need to, because deep down, I knew if I did, I'd see someone standing barefoot in the trees, watching us leave. We were 6 friends, young and reckless, eager for adventure. The plan was simple: spend 4 days trekking and climbing through the Northern Ridge, one of the most isolated mountain trails in the state. The area was known for its beauty, and for the fact that hardly anyone went there anymore. That was exactly why we chose it. It was late summer when we set out, backpacks heavy with gear, ropes coiled neatly, tents rolled tight. The air was crisp, the forest dense, and every step upward carried us farther from cell service, farther from civilization. By the first afternoon, we were high enough to see the valley spread out beneath us. The sunlight stretched long across the trees and spirits were high. That's when we saw him. At first, I thought he was just another hiker. He sat alone on a boulder about 50 yards away, knees drawn to his chest, watching us with unreadable eyes. His clothes were shredded, his pants torn at the knees, and his jacket was so filthy it was hard to tell its original color. In his lap was a backpack, not one of ours, but not a hiker's pack either. It looked cheap, frayed, out of place among our technical gear. He was eating from it with his bare hands, stuffing something into his mouth quickly, as if afraid it would be taken away. We slowed, uneasy. Nobody spoke at first. Finally, my friend Chris muttered, "What the hell is he doing out here dressed like that?" "Maybe he's lost," said Jenna, ever the optimist. "Or maybe he's watching us," I whispered, because I couldn't shake the way his eyes followed us. We tried to keep walking, pretending not to notice. When I glanced back a minute later, he was still sitting there, but the food was gone and he was just staring. By evening, we pitched our tents near the tree line. The sun had dipped behind the ridge, leaving a cold, bluish light. We ate quickly, joking to push away the unease. But I couldn't stop thinking about the man. "Maybe he's some mountain hermit," Chris said, "probably harmless." "Then why did it look like he was eating out of someone else's bag?" I shot back. No one had an answer. By 10, everyone had gone quiet. The woods pressed in heavy and dark, the only sound the occasional snap of a twig. I drifted in and out of sleep until a sound pulled me fully awake. A faint chirp. At first I thought it was the wind against the tent, but then it came again. Chirp, chirp. A slow, deliberate tearing sound. My pulse quickened. Someone was cutting fabric. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Jenna, who was in the sleeping bag beside me. She sat up, eyes wide. The sound grew clearer. Right outside. I grabbed my headlamp and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness just as something peeled back the corner of the tent. A long slit had been cut into the nylon. I froze, staring at the pale hand still clutching a knife. The second the light hit it, the hand withdrew. Fast. "Hey!" Chris shouted from his tent. He'd heard it too. Other beams of light snapped on, sweeping wildly across the camp. But the man was gone. Only the torn flap of our tent swayed in the cold air, the knife marks jagged and fresh. None of us slept after that. We sat huddled in a circle, lamps burning low, waiting for dawn. Every rustle of leaves set our nerves on edge. When the first light crept through the trees, we did a quick check of our camp. That's when we realized a bag was missing. It wasn't one of the gear bags. Our ropes, helmets, and harnesses were untouched. But David's pack, the one with half our food and water, was gone. At first, we thought maybe an animal dragged it off. But the ground told another story. Boot prints, human, leading away from camp and vanishing into the forest. "He took it," Jenna said quietly. Chris cursed. Unbelievable. He waited until we were asleep and just what? I snapped. Cut into our tents? Sneak around with a knife? That guy isn't just some lost hiker. He's dangerous. No one argued. The question now was whether to pack up and leave or keep going. The problem was, turning back wasn't simple. The ridge trail was steep and retracing it would take longer than pushing ahead to the next route down. But we had less food now, less water. We argued for an hour before deciding to push forward. None of us liked the idea of hiking back toward where he might be, but the unease never left. The second day was harder. We were tired, jumpy, constantly checking over our shoulders. The forest seemed thicker, every shadow a threat. By mid-afternoon, Chris froze on the trail. "Look," he hissed. There on a branch hung David's water bottle. It dangled by its strap, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Why would it be here?" Jenna whispered. "It's a warning," I said. "He wants us to know he's following." Nobody wanted to admit it, but we all knew it was true. We were being hunted. That night, we pitched camp earlier, trying to fortify the tents, piling rocks around them like makeshift barriers. Max, the quietest of our group, suggested we take shifts staying awake. So we did. I had the second watch. At around 2 a.m., while the others slept, I sat clutching a flashlight, eyes darting between the trees. For a long time, there was nothing. Then, just past the glow of the dying fire, I saw movement, a figure, standing perfectly still between two pines. I raised the light, and there he was, the strange man, clothes in tatters, face shadowed by matted hair. He wasn't holding the knife, but I knew it was somewhere close. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me unblinking. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, to wake the others, but something in his eyes pinned me where I sat. It felt less like looking at a man and more like an animal deciding whether to strike. Finally, he stepped backward into the dark, vanishing without a sound. I didn't sleep a second after that. By morning, the group was fraying. Everyone was scared, exhausted, and angry. We moved faster, speaking little, driven only by the thought of getting off that mountain. But the signs kept coming. A piece of rope cut and left dangling on the trail. An empty food wrapper that had been inside David's stolen pack, always placed where we'd see it. He wanted us to know he was close. That night, none of us slept. We sat with the fire burning high, weapons in hand, knives, trekking poles, even rocks. Every crack of branches set us on edge. But he never showed himself again. On the fourth day, we finally reached the end of the trail, stumbling back toward a ranger station at the edge of the forest. The sight of that wooden building nearly brought me to tears. We told the ranger everything, the torn tents, the missing pack, the man we'd seen. He listened carefully, then shook his head. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "People report seeing someone like that out here every couple of years. A drifter, maybe. A squatter. Some say he lives off what hikers leave behind. Others say he used to be a climber who lost his mind out here years ago and never came back down." "Why doesn't anyone stop him?" Chris demanded. The ranger sighed. "We've looked, never found him. By the time we go searching, he's gone. And the forest out here, it hides things." We left shaken, our relief at being safe battling with the memory of that stare in the night. Even now, I can't forget it, because when I close my eyes, I see him, standing just beyond the firelight, waiting for the moment when the forest finally swallows me too. I live in an old apartment building downtown, the kind of place that feels like it's holding its breath. The walls are yellowed with age, the floorboards groan under every step, and the smell, a mix of dust, damp plaster, and old wood, never leaves, no matter how many windows you open. Most of the apartments are empty. People moved out years ago and never came back. On my floor there are only 2 units, mine and the one across the hall, which had been vacant for more than a decade. I'd grown used to the silence. In fact, silence was the very thing I liked most about living there. When you live in a building that's more empty than full, every sound becomes magnified. Even a footstep in the hallway could feel like thunder in your chest. But about a month ago, something changed. I came home late one evening and noticed that the door across from mine was nowhere the same. It had always been this old, splintered wooden door, the paint chipped and peeling. Suddenly, it had been replaced by something new. Heavy metal, dark gray, with a massive peephole that looked almost like an unblinking eye. No movers, no workmen, no noise, just one day an old wooden door, the next this new hulking slab of metal. I thought maybe the landlord had finally rented it out. That would have made sense. But there'd been no ad, no for rent sign, and no one ever brought furniture inside. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. The first few nights after that, I started hearing things. At first, just soft noises, a shuffle of feet, the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Always late at night, always when the rest of the building seemed dead. But the strange thing was, I never once saw anyone go in or out. No moving truck, no people, no furniture carried up the stairs. Even the neighbors on the floors above and below swore they hadn't seen anyone. One night, around 1 in the morning, I was climbing the stairwell after work. Halfway up, I felt it, like someone was behind me. I hurried to my door, fumbled with my keys, and slipped inside. Before shutting it, I glanced through my peephole. That's when I noticed it for the first time. A faint glow like a pale light seeping out from under the new door across the hall. I told myself it was nothing. A lamp, maybe. A candle. Anything ordinary. But things didn't stop. A week later, I found something waiting for me outside my door. A plain white envelope. No name, no stamp, no handwriting on the outside. Just left there, like a forgotten bill. I carried it inside, half expecting it to be junk mail. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in neat block letters. Stop looking through the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. I hardly ever used the peephole. Why would anyone think I was watching? Unless they had been watching me. They had been. The next morning I went downstairs to the doorman, old Hussein, who'd been at the front desk longer than I'd lived there. I asked casually, "Do you know who moved into the unit across from mine?" He frowned at me. "Nobody. That apartment's been empty for years," I pressed. "What about the new door?" He shrugged. "I didn't see anyone replace it." That didn't make sense. He was always there. Always. That night I decided to watch. I turned off my lights, pressed my eye to the peephole, and waited. The hallway stretched out in silence, stale air heavy with dust. After half an hour, I heard it. A faint click. My skin prickled. The door across the hall opened, slowly, carefully, but no one stepped out. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. And then, the sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy, coming closer. My breath caught. The steps stopped directly in front of my door. I froze, eye pressed to the peephole. I couldn't see anyone, nothing but the dim light of the hallway. But I could hear breathing right on the other side. And then, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. A whisper at my door. "I know you're standing there." My blood turned to ice. I stumbled back from the door, heart hammering, waiting for a knock, a rattle, a crash. But nothing happened. After a minute, the footsteps receded, fading down the hall. The next day when I came home, there was a chalk mark on my door, a crude X, 2 slanted lines drawn like a warning. I wiped it off, hands shaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever was inside that apartment was watching me. I went to the landlord himself, desperate for answers. He kept the building's records in a cramped little office on the ground floor. "Who's renting the apartment across from me?" I demanded. He flipped through his ledger. "Nobody. It's empty." "Empty?" I snapped. "There's a new door, there are noises, someone left me a note." The landlord stared at me flatly. "You're mistaken. That unit hasn't been occupied for years." I left his office more unsettled than ever. Either he was lying, or I was losing my mind. That night, I woke at 2 a.m. to a sound I'll never forget. 3 slow knocks. Not at my door. On the wall. The wall that separated my bedroom from the apartment across the hall. Knock, knock, knock. A long pause. Then again, knock, knock, knock. It sounded deliberate, like a code. I stood frozen in bed, sweat soaking my shirt. Finally, I shouted, voice shaking, "Who are you? What do you want?" Silence. For a long moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Then came the reply, muffled but unmistakable. "I'm the one who lives across from you, and I've been watching you every night." I still don't know how to explain what happened that night. Every time I think back to it, my stomach tightens and I feel that same uneasy chill crawl down my spine. It was late, almost past midnight, and I had just finished a long shift at the restaurant where I worked. The buses had already stopped running and the streets were empty. Normally I'd call a rideshare app, but my phone had died hours earlier. All I wanted was to get home, take off my uniform, and sleep. So I did what I'd done before. I stood by the main road and tried to flag down a taxi. At first it seemed hopeless. Car after car sped past, their headlights blinding, not a single one slowing down. The street was too quiet, too wide, and too dark. The kind of place where every sound echoes, and even your own footsteps sound suspicious. After maybe 15 minutes, I saw it. Headlights approaching low and steady. An older model taxi, the kind you rarely see anymore. Its paint was black, the surface dull, and its taxi sign wasn't lit. In fact, there was no sign at all. But as it got closer, the driver slowed down. He pulled up right next to me, leaned over and unlocked the back door. I hesitated. Something about the car felt off. Maybe it was the way it looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years, or how the windows were tinted so dark I could barely see inside. But I was tired, desperate to get home. And when you're standing alone on an empty street past midnight, your brain doesn't think logically. You just want to be safe. So I got in. The inside smelled faintly of old leather and something else I couldn't place, like damp wood or dust from an attic. The seat cushions sagged beneath my weight and the floor mats were frayed at the edges. The driver didn't say a word. He just glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes catching mine for a split second, and then he started driving. I cleared my throat. Can you take me to Pine Avenue, near 34th? He didn't respond, not a word, just a faint nod. The silence in that car was unbearable. I could hear the hum of the engine, the faint squeak of the suspension, and nothing else. No radio, no phone buzzing, not even the sound of the driver clearing his throat. Just nothing. I tried to relax, telling myself maybe he wasn't the talkative type, but as we drove I noticed something strange. The streets were empty, completely empty. Now I knew it was late, but this was the city. It's never that empty. Usually there are at least a few cars, someone walking their dog, a bus rolling by. But here, nothing. It was like we were the only ones left. After 10 minutes, I realized we weren't going the right way. Instead of turning toward Pine Avenue, the driver had taken a longer route. I leaned forward slightly. "Hey, this isn't the right way. You're supposed to turn left back there." The driver didn't react. His hand stayed firmly on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. I felt a lump forming in my throat. "Did you hear me? I said you missed the turn." Still nothing. I looked out the window, hoping to recognize where we were, but every street looked the same. Empty intersections, flickering streetlights, storefronts with shutters down, and no signs of life. I reached for my phone out of habit, only to remember it was dead. My stomach twisted. "Listen," I said louder this time. "I need to go to Pine Avenue. Just let me out here if you don't know where that is." Finally, the driver spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "We're almost there." That didn't calm me. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. We drove in silence for a few more minutes, my pulse hammering in my ears. I started paying attention to details, the driver's hands gripping the wheel, his pale knuckles, the way he never once looked back at me in the mirror again. And then suddenly, the car slowed down. I exhaled in relief, thinking maybe he was finally letting me out. But when I looked around, I froze. We were back at the exact same corner where I had gotten in. Same bus stop, same flickering streetlight, same crumbling billboard. The driver stopped the car, shifted into park, and without turning his head said, "Get out." I stared at him, confused. What? This isn't... Get out. His voice was sharper this time, leaving no room for argument. I opened the door slowly, my hands trembling, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The moment I shut the door, the driver pulled away. The car didn't speed off, didn't roar down the road. It just rolled away smoothly, the taillights dimming as it vanished into the dark. I stood there, my heart thudding so hard I thought I might pass out. It took me a full minute to gather myself, to understand what had just happened. I hadn't given him my starting point, and yet he had brought me right back to where I'd begun. The street was still empty. No cars, no people. Just silence. I ended up walking home that night, every shadow making me flinch, every distant noise making me turn around. I didn't see another taxi, another pedestrian, nothing. By the time I reached my apartment, my legs felt like they'd collapse under me. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the driver never reacted. The way the streets had been completely deserted. The way I ended up right back where I started. I even tried asking around, describing the taxi to other drivers. Black, old, no sign on top. Some nodded knowingly, others just shook their heads. One older driver told me quietly, "If you see a cab like that again, don't get in. Some rides aren't meant to take you anywhere." I laughed it off at the time, but deep down, I knew he was serious. To this day, I don't take taxis at night. I don't care how tired I am, how far I need to go, or if my phone is dead. I'd rather walk, because once you ride in a car that shouldn't exist, you never forget it. And every time I pass that corner, I half expect to see those same headlights creeping toward me again. It all started as something so small, something almost unnoticeable, that most people in the neighborhood didn't even pay attention at first. On the corner of Elmsworth Street, there was this old abandoned building with a wide crumbling wall that faced the bus stop. For years, that wall had been covered in faded paint, graffiti, and dust. It was just another piece of forgotten concrete in a city full of forgotten corners. But one morning, a line of handwriting appeared on it. Neat, deliberate handwriting, written in black ink that stood out sharply against the pale brick. The first line simply said, "Don't be late tonight." Nobody knew who wrote it. Some thought it was just a prank, some teenager messing around. But others, especially the older residents, noticed something strange immediately. The handwriting wasn't like graffiti. It wasn't spray paint or chalk. It looked like it had been etched there overnight, clean and precise, as if the wall itself wanted the words to appear. The next day, another sentence appeared. This time it said, "Check the second window." Now people were paying attention, because the thing was, every single morning without fail, there was a new line, always around the same length, always written in the same spot, and no one ever saw anyone writing it. Some residents claimed they stayed up late watching from their windows, but the wall remained blank all night. Then, like clockwork, when the sun rose, there it was, a new sentence, waiting for them. At first, the sentences were vague, almost harmless. Stuff like, "Don't forget the lights," or "It's quieter after 11. But as the days went on, the messages became more specific. One morning, it read, "The man in the red cap will not return." That freaked people out, because just the night before, an older man who always wore a red baseball cap had failed to show up at the corner store he visited daily. Nobody had seen him since. His family filed a missing person report later that week. That was when the neighborhood stopped treating it like a prank. People started whispering. Some said it was a warning, others thought it was a sick game. But no one could explain how the writing kept appearing. I lived 2 blocks away at the time, and curiosity got the best of me. One night I decided to stay near the wall, hidden in my car, parked far enough that I wouldn't draw attention. I waited. Hours passed, Midnight came and went. The wall remained blank. At around 2 in the morning, though, I noticed movement. A figure stepped out from the alleyway beside the building. A tall man, thin, wearing a long coat. His face was turned away from me, but what struck me most was his hands. He raised one hand and pressed his fingers against the brick. I expected him to pull out a marker, chalk, anything, but there was nothing in his hand. Yet as his fingers moved, the letters formed. Perfectly. Cleanly. The wall seemed to accept the strokes of his fingers as if it were paper. I sat there frozen, watching the sentence appear. When he was done, he stepped back, looked at it for a second, and then turned his head slightly, like he could feel me watching. That's when I ducked down in the car seat, heart pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. When I looked back up, he was gone. The next morning, the message was there in plain sight for everyone. Someone is watching. That was enough for me. I didn't want to be anywhere near that wall again, but the neighborhood couldn't ignore it. People started gathering every morning to see the new message. The police got involved too. They even set up cameras around the building, but for some reason, the footage never caught anything. Every single time, the cameras would glitch between 1:55 and 2:10 a.m. By the time the feed came back, the message was already on the wall. Weeks went by and the sentences grew darker. One said, "She won't make it home." That same evening, a woman from the street was mugged just 2 blocks away and ended up in the hospital. Another message read, "Don't open the door tonight." A family on the street later reported that someone had tried to break into their house around midnight, but they had bolted the door shut after seeing the message. It was as if whoever, or whatever, was writing on that wall knew what was coming. By now, the story had spread far beyond the neighborhood. Reporters came, curious thrill seekers too, but the wall never failed. Every morning, another chilling line. People argued whether it was a blessing or a curse. Some saw it as protection. Others thought it was causing the bad events to happen. The scariest part, though, came about a month later. The message that morning was longer than usual. It said, "The one who keeps watching will be the next to disappear." And that was the morning I felt my blood run cold. Because I knew. It was talking about me. I had been there. I had watched the figure right on the wall. I had told no one. No one except you now as I tell this story. But back then only I knew the truth of what I had seen. For days I couldn't sleep. I kept my curtains shut, avoided the wall completely, and tried to pretend none of it had ever happened. But one night, coming home late, I passed near that corner. I didn't want to, but my car had to go by. And as I looked, I saw him again. The man in the coat, standing in front of the wall, not writing this time, just staring across the street, staring at my car as it rolled past. The next morning, the message said, "Closer than you think." I moved out of that neighborhood the following week. I couldn't take it anymore. To this day, I don't know what became of that wall. Some say the building was eventually demolished. Others say the messages still appear on the construction boards they put up. But I'll tell you this. I never went back to check, and maybe that's why I'm still here to tell you this story. There's a small street in my old neighborhood that most people avoid after dark. Not because it's dangerous, not because of crime, but because of something far stranger. If you walk down that street past midnight, you'll notice one particular lamppost, an old, rusted one that flickers in and out like it's on the verge of burning out. People call it the breathing light because of the way it dims and brightens rhythmically, almost like it's alive. But that's not why people avoid it. They avoid it because of the girl. The first time I heard about her, I thought it was just another urban legend, one of those stories kids tell to scare each other. But the details were too consistent. Too many people had seen her. A young girl, maybe 12 or 13, standing directly under the lamppost. She wears a simple white dress, always clean, always pressed, and she carries a small book in her hands. Her hair falls in neat waves over her shoulders, and her face, well, that's the thing. People say she looks completely normal, friendly even. What unsettles everyone isn't how she looks. It's what she says. If you pass her, she'll look up at you with the most natural smile and ask, "Excuse me, could you tell me where the library is?" That's it. Just that one question. Always the same. Most people who've encountered her say she doesn't seem threatening. She doesn't follow you, doesn't scream, doesn't act strange beyond repeating the question. But if you answer her, no matter what you say, she just thanks you politely, looks down at her book again and stands there. If you pass by the next night, or even an hour later, she'll ask you the exact same question again. It sounds harmless, right? But here's where it gets strange. A friend of mine, Jason, told me his story. He used to work late shifts at the factory down the road, and his route home passed directly by that lamppost. One night he saw her standing there. He thought she was a lost kid, so he stopped. She looked completely normal, he told me. Like a schoolgirl waiting for her parents. I asked if she was okay, and she just smiled at me and asked about the library. I pointed her toward the actual public library a few streets over, but she just nodded and kept standing there. Didn't move an inch. Jason thought maybe she was waiting for someone, so he walked on. But the next night, at the same time, there she was again. Same spot, same dress, same question. By the third night, Jason decided to test her. He asked, "What's your name?" She just tilted her head slightly, smiled, and repeated the same question. "Could you tell me where the library is?" That was when he got spooked. He swore to me he never took that street again after that. At first, I thought he was exaggerating, maybe pulling my leg. But then it happened to me. It was a rainy Thursday night and I had stayed too late at work. My car was in the shop, so I had to walk home. I wasn't even thinking about the stories as I turned onto that street. The rain had slowed to a drizzle and the air smelled like wet pavement. I was cold, tired, and just wanted to get home. Then I saw it, the lamppost ahead, flickering gently like it always did, and under it, her. She looked exactly how Jason described, a white dress, neat hair, small book clutched in her hands. She looked so out of place in the rain, but her dress wasn't wet at all. Not a drop. As I approached, she looked up at me. Her smile was warm, almost disarming. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Could you tell me where the library is?" I froze. Her voice was calm, clear, and normal. Not eerie, not distorted, just a girl asking a question. But every instinct in me screamed that something wasn't right. My mouth went dry. I wanted to keep walking, pretend I hadn't heard her, but my legs wouldn't move. Finally, I forced myself to nod. "It's, a few blocks east, on Maple Street." "Thank you," she said, her eyes dropping back to her book. She didn't open it, didn't turn a page, just stared at the cover. I walked away quickly, heart pounding, refusing to look back. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just a weird encounter. Maybe she was some local kid playing a prank. But 2 nights later, when I passed the street again, she was there. Same spot, same flickering light, same dress. And she asked me the same question. This time I didn't answer. I just kept walking, ignoring her. But before I turned the corner, I glanced back. She was still staring at me, her smile frozen in place. That image has stuck with me ever since. I started digging, asking other locals if they'd seen her. Most just shook their heads, unwilling to talk. But one older man, the kind who'd lived on that block his whole life, finally told me something. "They've been seeing her there for years," he said quietly. "Longer than you've been alive. Some folks say she's the ghost of a girl who used to study late at the library and never made it home one night. Others say it's something else entirely. Not a person at all. Just something that takes the shape of one." I asked him if anyone had ever followed her. He just looked at me sharply. "Don't. Whatever you do, don't follow her. That's how people disappear." I didn't believe him at first. But then I heard about a teenager who tried, a kid named Mark. Brave, cocky, the kind who laughed at scary stories. His friends dared him to stay near the lamppost and talk to the girl. According to them, he did. He stood there, asking her questions, trying to get her to break character. She never did. She just kept asking where the library was. Finally, Mark told his friends he was going to follow her if she left. That was the last night they ever saw him. The police report said he ran away. His parents insisted he would never do that. His friends, though, they knew the truth even if they didn't admit it. After that, I avoided that street at night. For months, I wouldn't go near it. But one evening, curiosity got the better of me. I told myself it was nonsense, that I had imagined half of it. So I went back. The lamppost was still there, flickering softly like always. But she wasn't. Relief washed over me. Maybe the stories had finally ended. Maybe she had moved on, whatever she was. Then, just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft voice behind me. "Excuse me. Could you tell me where the library is?" I didn't look back, I ran. And I've never walked that street again.